and welcome to Peace of Mind. So today we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. If most of you are not aware of, there has been a recent TV show that has been released on Netflix. And this show has kind of gone into the deeper depths of what kind of effect these people have on our community and how these people are able to get away with what they've done. And this is going to be intense, so sit back, relax, make sure you brought, OG Skywalker with you, because, honey, this is going to be a wild trip. You there?
I am there, yes. I am here, yes.
All right, so what we're going to do is, with this episode specifically, we're going to go over information about Jeffrey Dahmer. We both have kind of papers and information. We're going to go back and forth. For starters, let's start with childhood. I think one of the biggest problems when we're dealing with these mental health issues, and you have to remember, Jeffrey Dahmer is a perfect example of a sane human being that has a mental disorder that allowed him to be the person that he was. So, Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was the first of two sons of Joyce and Ned. And, I'm not 100% sure about this. It stated that she was a teletype machine instructor. If you're not aware of, Lionel was his father. He worked as a chemistry student and later a research chemist. His father was German and Welsh ancestry, and Joyce was Norwegian and Irish ancestry. So he grew up primarily in a white second-class home. So from what we're getting from this, right?
Yeah, they were and they became progressively more upper middle class as he got older as well. Like they were kind of like these working class people, and then as they got older, like the dad became, got a degree and stuff, and he was gone for a lot of his school. Like he was not at home when Dahmer was young because he was away at school studying and getting his degree. So there was just a lot of isolation from early childhood. I watched the show and I also have read other things on it as well. Um, I watched it while I was painting a big mural last week, and it has just been living in my brain since then. And I've thought about him in the past at times, but I'm not like somebody who's like, there are people who are like really like up on all their serial killer knowledge and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not really. I like periodically, I'm like, this is kind of an interesting thing because it's also just like, to me, it's not even interesting, like, oh, this is like a curiosity, but it's more like, how do these things happen in society? How do these things happen inside of a human being? What ethical and moral switch gets flipped off so that people are able to do these acts? And I think about this a lot. So I think about ethics and morality, even if you're somebody who has a curiosity about, harming others. What is it that basically just like mutes your ethics and morality?
Well,
But
interesting enough. I was reading over here. It stated that Dahmer had been an energetic and happy child, but became notably subdued after a double hernia surgery shortly before his
yes,
first birthday. Okay, I've heard this on the Joe Rogan podcast and other shows before. Some accidents that you run into, brain trauma is a great example. A car accident, a botched surgery, certain imagery, or something that's really, really damaging to the brain physically, can cause these new neural pathways in the brain to form where they kind of will trigger certain behaviors. So somebody that was sweet and kind and loving one day can become a ferocious, monstrous bitch the next, just from getting their head
yes.
smacked in.
Well, he was put under anesthesia, but like it wasn't a head injury though; it was a hernia, so it was something abdominal.
That's what I was
But
saying
the
also
other,
about,
yeah.
like,
But the other thing is though,
right.
he was I don't really, I feel like he was kind of like doomed from the beginning because his mother was a hypochondriac who was very emotionally manipulative and he like on 20 pills a day for different things, for anxiety, for sleeping, for like just and like this is back in like the 60s where there was like really heavy drugs that people are being prescribed. Like it wasn't like Zoloft and Paxil and like Abilify
Mm-mm.
or something. It was like these were like the heavy shit. Like I think like Quaaludes and stuff and sleeping pills. And those are things that really mess with you. And so if you're taking those like prenatally, like if you're taking those when you're pregnant with your child is absorbing all of those chemicals as well. As just like kids that are born like when you think about like a child that's born to addicts, like if their parents are like, like the like the idea of like a big crack baby or something, where it's like if a parent was had like addicted to crack cocaine or addicted to like heroin or like whatever, and the kid's born and they have that addiction as well. So and not only that, but like
Well,
parts of their bodies and their brain, they
they
can.
can develop. They
But some of
can
them are
develop.
born like literally detoxing from the chemicals with their if they're extremely addicted to chemicals. But like even if you don't have the addiction when you're born with these things, it still affects how you develop, like, and mentally, emotionally, physically. Like it can stunt and alter growth because that's literally like, I mean, they're extremely heavy narcotics. And so like even before he was 4, the surgery probably did something as well. There's still that aspect of things where he might not have fully been like developmentally adept in certain area, not develop, well,
Well,
like areas
one thing we're
psychologically.
learning, one thing we're learning throughout Dahmer's story is triggers. He constantly has these different triggers. You mentioned from the birth, okay? His mother was on constant of these really heavy drugs. Then he has the double hernia. The other interesting thing is in later on, like in the late mid 60s, in 1966, his family moved to Doylestown, Ohio. So they left Wisconsin and they moved to Ohio. And his mother had a second child in December of that year. And I mean, it was weird. This is interesting. Like it says that Jeffrey was allowed to choose the name of his new baby brother.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, like he chose a name.
That's very uncommon.
Yeah, like
Yeah, like who does that? Like
yeah.
children, I mean, it's kind of a cool thing to do. Like it's cool to have the kid be able to choose, but that's a very like not normative thing, especially in like white suburban America. Like, but the thing is, like, okay, so in all of that time though too, like, so his mother was home alone on drugs all the time, in bed a lot of the time, and even like tried to commit suicide at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And his father was out of town a lot of the time. He wasn't at home because he was finishing his degree. And his father like had said that like he was uncomfortable around his son. He just always felt uncomfortable about Dahmer. And so but then he found a way to bond with him when he taught him taxidermy. So literally this little kid who's like being raised by like a legal drug addict and then a half absent father, like his main bonding ritual with the one parent that's not high all the time is cutting up animals.
Which, by the
Like
way,
that's what they did together.
yeah, but just like pointing this out, doing taxidermy or hunting with a family
No,
member,
yeah.
it's not a bad thing. For some people, the environment you grew up in or things your family are interested in, it can actually be kind of enjoyable. Like it's a family thing for a son or a daughter
Oh
or
yeah.
his children to go out hunting.
I've
Um,
had weirdo friends who did taxidermy as
yeah.
adults, and they're perfectly fine. A lot of them are like vegan and stuff. Like it doesn't necessarily mean you're like you're a sociopath because you enjoy doing taxidermy. But when you're a young child and you're not getting like you're basically being like emotionally neglected and like you know not in a positive environment, and that's the one bright point in your life is mutilating dead animals. That's that's a little bit of like this I don't know.
A
The other
warning sign.
it's a
A warning.
warning sign. At least a red flag. It's not a warning. It's a red flag that you should take note of. But also, I think this is really important to remember. This isn't a period of time when like therapy was like a dirty word. Like if either of his parents, any teacher had ever been like, "Hey, maybe you need to like see a counselor regularly," like they would have realized there was something deeply messed up with him. He was like a functional alcoholic, like drinking every day heavily liquor and beer in class during school from 14 years old on. And
Yeah,
he
sober
was a
alcoholic.
he was like a barely functional alcoholic until the day he was arrested for murder. He was like a often falling down, like couldn't fully articulate kind of alcoholic daily. Like this person was somebody, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but this is something that I think that show was like, because when I first started watching it, I was just like, God, do we really need another show about? Do we need a Jeffrey Dahmer show? And then I was like, oh, Evan Peters is playing. I love Evan Peters. Okay, I'm gonna watch it for that. Maybe I'll just watch like an episode. Then I was like, oh wait, this is an interesting take on it, and it really is an interesting take on it because it's like kind of the first time that we're like watching a serial killer show or movie or whatever, where we're not focusing on the serial killer, we're more focusing on like the effects it had in society and culture, and like the insane like white privilege that went into him getting away with it for so long, and like also just like how there were so many different points in time where if we had been in a society that talked about things, that paid attention to these warning signs, someone would have realized something was wrong with him. Maybe they wouldn't have realized the extent of it, but like someone, if they actually asked him how he was doing, if they actually got in depth with him, they would have realized that he needed help.
You
He got,
know,
yeah,
going completely off subject and just thinking about it being like kind of the environment, and if you take the band like the Stooges and you have a person like Iggy Pop literally destroyed himself in the 70s. He was a mentally damaged individual. He was doing quaaludes. He was like literally slitting his chest open on stage. Like he was
this
bad.
is doing the same drugs that Jeffrey Dahmer's mom was.
Like he was, yeah, he was on heroin, he was on pills, and he survived.
Yeah,
But you say to yourself, okay, why am I
but he
comparing
didn't.
this?
But he didn't have those. He didn't have violent, intrusive thoughts the way that
Right,
Jeffrey
but
Dahmer did.
but the thing is, and this is why I'm bringing this up. When you have a person that, and like this is even discussed where like there's this desire of control. It's this desire of control of having what you want. And with Dahmer it was like the submissive, like creating this zombie that he can do whatever he want to. And that was like the constant trend over and over and over again of he wanted control. He wanted control.
But he
And
also wanted them to like love him forever and never leave him
correct, yeah.
because he had like a very sickly metastasized version of abandonment issues from his childhood and from also just being like a gay man back when he was a young gay man. Like there's no excuse for what he did. But I think
No.
that looking at him as a human and in the places where he was failed as a person, where people failed him, is what can help us as a culture keep things like this from happening in the future. Like
Yeah.
you can't and I don't I also but before we because we're I feel like it's gonna get be a pretty intense episode in a lot of ways. I want to say to anyone listening, I'm not defending him in any way if I sound empathetic. I'm not empathizing with any of his actions. I'm not identifying or defending any of his
He's a
actions,
monster.
but I'm empathizing with the little boy that was neglected and trying to understand how to prevent things that create people like Jeffrey Dahmer in the future. Because he wasn't always he be at some point the intrusive thoughts took over and he did not have enough of the emotional or familial support to be like, oh my god, I shouldn't do this, I should talk to somebody about this.
Yeah.
Like he didn't have the moral compass because it was never instilled in him.
No.
And he didn't, and he happened to just not have it normally. He just didn't have one. But he also like he was failed by every single adult around him when he was young. And so when those intrusive thoughts became overwhelming and he started to do these terrible things and turn into the monster that we know of him as an adult, there was nothing that was keeping that door of it. Like there was nothing keeping the threshold of those intrusive thoughts at bay.
I mean, it even, it's crazy to even think, like, in his early to mid teens, he had these masturbatory like fantasies, which gradually evolved to his focus upon chest and torsos. We know this. He had this thing where he would chop up the bodies and eat certain organs, but he had a thing for torsos, and these fantasies gradually became intertwined with his dissection. I mean, he was about like 16 years old. He like would conceive these fantasies of like rendering unconscious people. Like particularly, he had like this male jogger he found attractive, and then making like sexual use of his body. So like he didn't even care that it was like the person was even alive. And on one occasion, like Dahmer concealed himself in bushes with a baseball bat to lie in wait for this man. However,
Yeah.
he did not pass by on that particular day. And Dahmer later admitted that this was his first attempt to attack and render an individual submissive to him. So, like, this was like,
And he was 16 years old.
yes,
This
just
is a
crazy.
16-year-old. This is a 16-year-old hiding in the bushes with a baseball bat. Where are his parents?
Watching him,
Like,
yeah.
where is any adult in his life being like, hey, dude, maybe you should like talk, you know, chill out. Let's talk. Like who no one who raised this person. Like and that's kind of what I'm saying, where it's like, and this is something I think a lot about. This is when I my first gut like immediate takeaway when I watched the show was just like, this is still happening, and this is why we have those like stupid dudes on 4chan that go and shoot up movie theaters and shot up a suburb of Chicago. Like also being from Chicago, it's weird that there's, I don't know, there's a lot of circulation. There's Gacy and there's Dahmer, and then this dude shouted up like on the around the 4th of July this just past year, one of the suburbs of it. And like there's a lot of other crazy shit in Chicago too. I mean, Chicago's a crazy city, but like it's, I'm glad I'm from there. But yeah, it's crazy, crazy fucking city. That's a whole episode. Um,
Yes, that
but
can be a
like
whole episode.
it can. We can talk about Chicago. It'd be fun. I can tell you all about the underground scene. It's really, really great. Unfortunately, also weirdly, his old stomping ground for finding people to kill in Chicago apparently was also the neighborhood where all the freaks and the weirdos and the queers hung out in Chicago.
So,
So I'm we were, I people that I knew that were older in the scene probably walked on the street at the same time as him at some point. It's creepy. It's very eerie.
so here's the weird thing, and like this is shown in the TV show. He, like, among his peers when he was in high school, Dahmer became something of a class clown who often staged pranks. Okay, which became known as doing a Dahmer. Like he literally became like the meme of the school, and these included like bleeding and simulating epileptic seizures or cerebral palsy at school and local stores. On occasion, Dahmer would perform these antics for money to purchase alcohol. Like he would do anything to be like the attention and control and just be high on alcohol, just be
Yeah.
constantly drunk. And
But also, yeah, but also like when I read that, it like kind of creeped me out a little bit because I mean, just okay, so like I'm like a generation ahead, older than you, and one younger or like one and a half younger than him. But when I was in grade school in the 90s, elementary school, kids were still doing that. I had a friend who did that. People would make fun of him and call him the R word, and so then he would act out. Like I like that's something and maybe I hope that this doesn't happen in schools as much anymore, but I went to a public elementary school and that happened all the time. And that was a thing. And so I'm hearing this and I'm like, oh my God, like I knew people that did that. Like I knew people that like, because that was like how you felt. That's how you felt accepted. That's how they felt accepted by the bullies. That's how they felt like that was their social. It's so messed up, but it's also very like uncomfortably familiar because that was something that was, again, I'm hoping that nobody mimics being like, mimics cerebral palsy and other things now. And like,
Mm-mm.
I think it's cool to say the R word and call each other that and do it for fun. But that was something that was really normal, even when I was like 9, 10 years old. And it was a form of social capital. Like it was for the alcohol, but it was also because otherwise everybody just thought he was a freak. When at least with this is with the friend that I was thinking about, like from my childhood, like it was like because we were all like the outcast kids, like we were all the fucking weirdos. We were all like, we all grew up to be like the art the artists or the queers or some of them, some didn't make it, but like he must have like that was a form of how he found acceptance with people. And he probably, and like that was, and also money, but otherwise he was only seen as this freak or this like the the bad F word for gay men. Like,
Faggot.
yes, I can't say it as a femme queer.
Well, you know something? I
You
had
can
an
say it.
I had an English friend that once told me. He said, "You know what the F word means?" He says it means a
It's a
bundle
bundle
of
of sticks.
twigs. Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
and I remember once I had somebody that said that term to me, like in slang, and I looked back at him. I was like puzzled. I gave him a puzzled look, and I said to him, I'm like, I look like a bundle of twigs. I looked at my friend. I'm like, do I look like a bundle of twigs? And
That's
he
funny.
looked at me and he was like, what? Like I literally like used the logic against him. But so Dahmer was pictured in 1978 yearbook. You can actually find that picture pretty much everywhere online. By 1977, Dahmer's grades had declined. His parents hired a private tutor with
He
limited
was drunk all the
success.
time.
Yeah.
Sorry, like, sorry, like, obviously, like, but this is what I'm saying. Where were his parents? Where were his teachers? Where were his aunt and uncle? Where was his Christian grandmother who told him he was going to hell for being gay? Where were any of the adults in his life intervening in any part of his life? If your 14-year-old child is drunk every day, coming home from school, that's not that kid's fault. That's your fault as a parent. You're a negligent parent and you need to be like held accountable for just being a shitty parent.
Yeah.
Like,
Like in an attempt to save their marriage, his parents attended counseling sessions. Uh, they continue to quarrel frequently. So this is the thing. Also, his parents used to fight like cats and dogs because
constantly, yeah.
his dad was taking care of his sick mother, which was full of problems to begin with. And when Lionel discovered Joyce had engaged in a brief affair in September of 1977, they both decided to divorce, telling their sons they wished to do this amicably. And Lionel moved out of the house in early 1978 and temporarily residing in a motel on North Cleveland. Uh, and I mean, at this point, like his parents, he's had he has enough shit.
What I have
Hmm?
to add to that. So
Yes.
that piece that you shared that I read before this, that you just read from, did not mention the most important part of that period of his life is that his mother moved out with his younger brother, and basically they were like, "See ya, bye." The brother that he names, and while the father was gone, so the mother just like snuck out with the brother while the father had moved and relocated to another city, and he, at the end of his high school years, as a graduating high school, he was, and this is also when he killed the first victim. He was left alone for like 4 months in a house, not knowing where his parents were or what was happening in his life. Like, put like his actions terrible. Again, 100% not defending any of that. He should be held accountable. He should have, I think, I mean, like there's no excuse for what he did.
I
But
mean, I mean,
who
like,
does that to their child?
literally, not even in like May of 1978. Like, this is the following year. Dahmer graduated from high school. A few weeks before his graduation, one of his teachers observed Dahmer sitting close to the school parking lot,
Yeah.
drinking several cans of beer. When
Yeah.
the teacher threatened to report the matter, Dahmer informed him he was experiencing a lot of problems at home, and that the school's guidance counselor was aware of them. That spring, Joyce and David moved out of the family home, like we said, to live with relatives. In Chippewa? Is it Chippewa Falls?
It's Chippewa Falls, yeah.
And Dahmer had just turned 18 and remained in the family home. Dahmer's parents' divorce, was finally finalized in July, and Joyce was awarded custody of her younger son and alimony payments. So,
And the younger son's fine, by the way. He won't talk about his brother, but like he's like lives a very normal life and has a family somewhere and like tries to stay out of the light, like 100%. Um, like his parent. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is just my immediate thought about this. It's just like his parents should have been punished for this. His parents should like I don't know. His like this is like someone who didn't have the intrusive thoughts and the sort of sociopathic tendencies and the other stuff would not have turned out well with his childhood. Somebody who had a very strong constitution and like what did was not prone to any sort of psychological issues would have not turned out well with his childhood. Like his childhood is terrible. Like they were middle class, so he wasn't hungry in the way that kids who don't have money are hungry, and he didn't live in poverty. But in terms of his emotional development, like that entire family should be put in prison. Not really, but like that's my that's my like immediate response to it on that
and,
sort of just like
and
emotional
again,
level.
this is why I bring it up. Like, when it came to the punk rock scene and the goth in the late 60s and 70s, a
Hmm.
lot of these kids here in the US, they came from middle class families, from very fucked up homes
Yeah,
in middle class.
they did.
And
Yeah,
they're not murderers. That's not the point I'm
no,
trying to bring this up. These were people that were fucked up in the head doing really dangerous things, caused even people to overdose on drugs.
yeah,
But you see the manifestation of parents not doing their part with their kids. Again, no parent is going to be perfect, but you literally can see here, if your kid is suffering from something.
yeah. This isn't just like not perfect. This is like award-winningly bad. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and yes, it's completely true that like in the early like punk and goth scenes and stuff, like a lot of, and also like the not the race, the non-racist skinheads in like Europe and stuff. Those were all kids. Like some of them were working class kids, and some of them were middle class kids, and a lot of them were white, and but a lot of them
But
were
most of
all from
them,
these kind of
but most
negligent
of them,
families.
most of them in England came from the working class. The
Yes.
punk scene developed from the working class, the poor ones, very, very poor ones in England. But in the United
Well, here it did.
States,
No, here it did too in cities. So that's the difference. Because I think you have like being from a city underground scene myself, like there's a huge difference between the suburban underground scenes and the city underground scenes. And the city underground scenes are the poor kids, and the suburban under like a lot of the time. Like sometimes you'll have a few rich kids, but the city's just not it. The city is more working class. Big cities in general, and then you have the suburban like punk and goth kids. You have the suburban underground scenes, and those are completely different. They're completely different things. But it's also different in that like the the neglect of like middle class suburban children is insane. And it's not like neglect in the way that you have in like areas where people just don't have the means to take care of their children. It's just like absolute emotional and mental starvation. Like the kids have everything that they want that's tangible and physical, and they have like zero connection to their family emotionally, and like zero support for who they actually are. And I feel like it's kind of always been that way because their parents are
um,
so focused on themselves.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing is, we're only going to be focusing on one of the victims. We're not going to go over Hicks. You could watch the series. You can also read this on Wikipedia, and there's other articles and books that have been done on this as well about the victims. But 6 weeks after the murder of Hicks, Dahmer's father and his fiancee returned to his home, where they discovered Jeffrey living alone at the house. So this is during the period of where his father went away, and then his mother kind of kind of moved with David away, just leaving him alone.
Yeah.
And that August, Dahmer enrolled at Ohio State University, hoping to major in business. Dahmer's sole term at the OSU was completely unproductive, largely because of his persistent alcohol abuse throughout the majority of the term. He received failing grades in Introduction to Anthropology, Classical Civilizations, and Administrative Science. The interesting thing is, like, the only course Dahmer was successful at was riflery. Like,
Yeah.
having received a B negative grade, his overall GPA was 0.45 out of 4. That's terrible.
It is, but again, it's like, what was the dad's solution for this? He pushed him into the military, where Dahmer not only got tactical training with weapons, but he also got medical training, learning how to put people under anesthesia. Like, it's just like every person who should have been correcting him, and not like, even, I'm not even saying like, like every person who should have been like guiding him in a better direction literally handed him the tools to do everything that he did with, on a mental and emotional level. Like, and there was no like, hey, maybe let's get you into a program to stop drinking, hey, maybe go to some meetings. There was this harsh like Christianity shame around his homosexuality, and this like, you got to straighten up and fly right, you got to do something that's going to toughen you up. It was like, and then like, and when you have all of these people that are supposed to be guiding you in the right direction, telling you that you're already doomed, and you have these violent thoughts and you have these weird afflictions, and you don't know that, and you don't know what else to like, you don't really have that. Here's Wait, I really want to, I'm gonna kind of detour back to talk about like just like the sort of the punk and the goth scenes in general, and like, or like just the weirdo scenes, the queer scenes, all the underground stuff, because there's like, I have a point here. Can I do that for 2 seconds? A lot of those kids had similar backgrounds to him. I'm not saying that he's unique in any capacity.
No, he's
That was
not.
that stuff. He's not. That stuff was rampant, and that stuff was even worse for a lot of kids. He was never beaten for being gay by his parents. Like, they beat each other, but like, he wasn't. I don't think he was ever hit. Like, there's so much worse that it could have been for him. I'm not saying by any means that he, deserves like this, a lot of sympathy on that level. But I'm saying like, what was wrong with him was such a, it was something that was so prevalent in society in general. But the difference was, he never found that community that he clicked with, that was able to help him realize what he should and shouldn't do. He never found a person that he connected with because he didn't quite connect with people. And I think that is the difference between like why kids who had worse families than him in similar demographics in like the punk scene, for example, early punk scene, didn't do that kind of stuff. Maybe they were self-destructive. Maybe they were kind of like, crazy in different ways, but like, they found other outlets. They found music, they found art, they found whatever, like just being crazy.
Well,
Like, but they didn't.
think about Iggy Pop. I hate to say this, but I feel like if Iggy didn't find the Stooges, if he didn't find that group, that niche, I don't know what he would have been capable of. To
100%. And
He could
that's
have
so
been
many other
extremely
people. Yeah,
dangerous.
I know. And I think about that with like David Bowie. I think about that with like,
Oh yeah, big time.
like so many of the like Trent Reznor, like so many like Skinny Puppy, like all the ones that have like some of the darkest shit, and then like, or like the
Brian
singer of
Jones,
Korn, Jonathan Davis, like there, it goes on and
Mick
on in every
Jagger.
genre. Yeah, a lot of the people who have these extremely dynamic and powerful presences creatively have found ways to channel that darkness into art.
Big time. Yeah.
He never found that community, and the darkness just became darker and darker and darker and darker. And once he went down one door to that corridor, he just kept going and never stopped. And also being like a daily, like almost blackout drunk alcoholic since he was 14, that fucks up your how you emotionally and like and mentally develop as well. That affects how your brain develops. That affects your emotional capacity to connect with other people.
You
So the
wonder.
difference is he didn't connect with the other people, and the early punks and goths and that whole schema of things did connect with each other. The community was at the core of that entire culture and that entire scene, whereas he had no community.
You wonder to yourself. I wonder to myself if he ever. Again, he is still a monster and will always be a monster. What he did is tragic and horrible and disgusting.
Yeah, it's
But
horrifying. There's no justification
no,
for it, and
absolutely
yeah,
not. No. But if he would have gone into a punk band or something in the goth scene,
yeah.
he would have. Oh my god.
If he found like the queer underground scene in like
Ooh.
the 80s,
Could be in
he would
glam
probably would
rock.
it could have yeah, I know. He like that's the thing. It could have been a completely different world. It could have been a completely different like he wouldn't have done those things. Like people would still be alive probably. He probably would have just been a moderately famous dude, and maybe he'd still be alive, or maybe he would have overdosed or something or whatever. Like he would have had like that life of just like the because it's that I think that darkness that he and that's kind of something that was I was talking with my friend about right after I watched this. I watched this right before I watched this right before I had like my big crazy psychedelic birthday party last weekend, and it was a very strange way to go into my birthday party watching the last episode, and I'm just like still thinking about like Evan Peters as Jeffrey Dahmer, and I'm like trying to like have this fun beach time like birthday party photo shoot with people. I'm just like weird. Why did I do this to myself? But like I was talking to my friend about this too, where it's like, that's like I think about the actor who played him, and like like my friend and I were talking we're like, is Evan Peters okay like as a person? Because he plays psychopath after psychopath, and he gets into the roles, and he's a brilliant actor. And I think people are finally starting to realize that. I feel like people kind of wrote him off because he was on a lot of sort of more campy things, but he's a real actor. Like he's really, really good. And he's really, really good at being a person like Jeffrey Dahmer on screen. It's like, however he was when he was young, that has to take a toll on you psychologically. But he is an example in playing Jeffrey Dahmer of someone who's taking that darkness, whether it's his own or whether it's the world's or whether it's just like empathetically relating to what has happened, to other people or whatever, like, and transmuting that into something that is like a phenomenal performance, but also something that tells a side of the story that we hadn't heard before in a way we hadn't heard before. He's able to take that darkness and turn it into something powerful and good and like positive.
So kind of skipping a little forward, in March 24th of 1981, so we're kind of ready now in the 80s, and Dahmer was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for debriefing, and he was provided with a plane ticket to travel anywhere in the country. He later told police he felt he could not return home to face his father, so he opted to travel to Miami Beach.
And forget he also killed somebody already.
Yes, he did.
He killed somebody. He killed somebody when he was left alone in his house for 4 months by his parents.
Right. Well,
he killed a hitchhiker.
Yeah, just to briefly go over that, he was a hitchhiker. He brought him over to his place. He said he wanted to leave. He started to freak out, and he hit him over the head with a dumbbell and strangled him to death. And he went through a whole process of dismembering and then pretty much burying the entire body. And then his father came back. So this is like literally in between the period of his mom leaving him and his dad being away because of,
Yeah. And he was like he was either just that was either just before he was 18 or right when he turned 18. So legally he's an adult at this point, but he's not. I mean, he's legally an adult. Obviously, he should legally be treated like an adult, but he was a senior in high school. Like, again, 100% not saying that he should be forgiven for anything that he did,
No.
but where were his parents?
I mean, the crazy part about this was, like, he found a job at a delicatessen and he rented a room in a nearby motel. He spent most of his salary on alcohol. I mean, obvious. That's pretty much what he
Yeah.
did. And was soon evicted from the motel from non payment. So he initially spent his evenings on the beach as he continued to work at the sandwich shop until phoning his father and asking to return to Ohio in September of this same year. So, I mean, like, he's kind of bouncing around of, I mean, he has this resentment towards his family. Like, he doesn't want to spend time with his father, but he goes back. Kind of going over this just briefly, when he came back, he didn't stay for very long. He moved in with his grandmother, which he did very well, which was very
Well,
strange.
no, he didn't though. He When he was with his grandmother, he did very well on the surface, and he held down a job for a while, doing something with the
Right,
medical
right.
knowledge that he got from the military. And then he got fired from that as well, and then he became, I think, a butcher. Uh, and then he eventually got fired from that as well. But during that period, he also murdered more people, and that was also the period that his grandmother literally walked in right before, like as on one of the victims, when he was already like, high out of his mind from whatever Dahmer had given him. Like Dahmer was not doing well. He was just slightly more functional in society at that period of time. And that was because he wasn't out drinking all the time. He was at home with his grandmother, hanging out with this old Christian lady, but also being told that he was, already being told that he was going to hell because he was gay too. So that is also that kind of reinforcement as well, that negative reinforcement.
I mean, he already had also, you got to remember also, he had criminal charges against him. I mean, first of all, he was at a state affair where he exposed himself in
Yeah,
front of children,
that was during
adults.
that period.
Yeah, and then, he got charged and then he was fine. And then he was caught again masturbating, right across from a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And
And that was when he went to prison for um uh an inappropriate, something with a minor, right?
yeah,
Or was that with that one, or was that a later one?
no, that was the second time, and then he got imprisonment for a short term, and then he was
For a
fined,
year. Yeah, he was in prison for a year.
and then he had to also file as a. So this is the crazy thing. Also, he was filed as a sex offender at this point.
Yeah.
So when he was doing all of his murders, he was legally a sex offender,
Yeah.
and the
But
there
he moved
was
into a neighbor. I mean, but the thing is, like, and this is where it starts to get twisted on like a socio-political level too, is like he's this cute white dude, like like the base of everything. You look at him and like if I were to look at him and you like not a mugshot or something that I knew who he was, I'd be like, oh, I bet this guy is in a band or something. He looks like a nerdy math rock guy. Like he's not like he and like the judges are basically like, you don't belong in prison. Like you just need to find a good girl and like settle down. Like talking to this person who would then go on to like eat 16 human beings. Like because everybody saw him as this you know like cute kind of basic like white dude from a kind of basic middle class family in the suburbs. They saw him as this kind of good kid or whatever. That's the and like and he lived in places, and this was something that I also thought when I was watching it at first, like was just like he targeted he lived in he well this okay this I'm going to pause because it gets more relevant when we
Well,
talk about
okay,
the
so
next place he was.
here's something really important to keep in mind. Before he started targeting people in the gay clubs and bars, he used to go to bathhouses, and he used to, this is earlier, he used to sedate them, and then he
Yeah,
would have sexual intercourse. And what happened was is the club was picking on what he was doing because his victims were alive, and they banned him. He was thrown
they did.
out.
Yeah.
And I think he got into this like mental state of, okay, I have to be able to control the person. And we later see where he started, we'll talk about this. There was the Laos kid that he killed, where he would pour acid in their brain to zombify them. And his
Lao.
experiment,
There's no S in Lao.
yeah, there was. He
No,
poured.
no, I'm saying there's no S in Lao. Lao. That's not Laos. It's
Oh, it's Lao.
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 Yeah.
Um, sorry.
Sorry.
But anyway, so he would basically drill a hole and inject acid. And again, like we're seeing this pattern of all he wants is to hold on to something that won't abandon him.
Yes. And again, we're not saying poor Dahmer, but it's like this is a deeply twisted and person that has been deeply twisted, and this is a person who from childhood did not get needs met, and because of his other afflictions,
Yes.
those needs became completely metastasized into this horror show that was his life.
Um, I think it's important to talk about this victim. I mean, even in the show, you can see with the family and
Yeah.
how. I mean, for starters, so kind of even skipping the whole 80s. I mean, we've kind of briefly gone over this. This is kind of towards the end. So on the afternoon of May 26, 1991, Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old Lao teenager. I
Well,
do not know.
yeah, we need to backtrack a little bit though, because I feel like this is extremely important
Oh, sorry.
culturally
Yeah,
too.
yeah, we
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
So so basically his grandmother, I think, also, like, kicks him out eventually as well after he drugs and almost kills this African American guy that he was like, and his grandmother saw this and was like, I don't trust you here anymore, even though he'd already killed two people in her home while she was there. Like, everyone around him is a fucking idiot. But like, but like, he moves into this neighborhood, in this lower income African American neighborhood,
In Milwaukee.
in Milwaukee, and has and he is consistently killing young African American, like not even young, but like his age ish, like, young queer African American
He did
men.
have a victim that was 30 and then another one that was 32.
Yeah, but he was like, it was 20s ish was his like, there was a couple that were younger, but it was mostly like within the gay club scene, and it was mostly African American men. Almost all of his victims were people of color. And there is a question of, did he know that in doing that people would not come looking for him because of the racism of the Milwaukee police and the disregard for people of color's lives? Because that's a factor as well. Like, he had the police called on him multiple times by his one neighbor who was an African American lady, who complained about the smell, and knew without knowing that what was going on in there, and tried to get the police called on him multiple times, even with the 14-year-old Laotian kid. Like, he but the thing is, and this was something when he was arrested, like, it was like, why did nobody report, why wasn't there more done to look for these victims? And it's because this is the 80s in the,
Well,
gay
late
scene.
80s.
Yeah, this is the late 80s in, like, with the late 80s in a not super conservative, not like South conservative, but relatively conservative city in Wisconsin, with police officers who want nothing to do with the gay community at all, or with people of color, and see both as criminals automatically. And so no one looked for the gay African American he had murdered, because of the general racism and homophobia
Well,
of the Milwaukee
well,
police enforcement.
think about it like this. Also, keep in mind this is during the Reagan administration, and this is also
Yeah,
during the AIDS pandemic. And the way that the Reagan administration put it is good. We're getting rid of the gays. So there was this thing in this country of, let's just wait, sit back, relax. The AIDS will kill them all out, and
yeah,
then we'll be peaceful. So they didn't really give a shit because in their minds they're like, oh, they'll be dead anyway in a couple of years. This is how horrible this
yeah.
country was, and I am conservative myself. I don't justify their actions by any means. It's
I'm not
disgusting and
conservative at all, by the way.
but but the
Disagree, but
but
yes, go on.
but the whole problem over here is that you have this lack of decency and respect and safety for the people in your community around you, where you have these people that cannot be properly kept safe
No.
because no one gives two shits about them.
Well, right. That's exactly the thing. I'm sure you're going to talk about the 14-year-old kid next. First of all, that was the younger brother of the kid that he molested years before that, which is one of the craziest things of this whole story.
Yes.
Like, it's mind blowing. And like, but also like his neighbor who was the African American woman and her daughter who was over, or her niece or something that was over and visiting, they called the police because they clocked that kid was underage and that there was something more than him just being drunk. And they called the police, and the police interacted with them
So
and interacted with the 14-year-old after he already had acid in his brain and sent him back to Dahmer's apartment.
let's kind of briefly kind of break this down where like we mentioned he was 14 years old, and that he basically approached him and offered him money to accompany him to his apartment to pose for Polaroid pictures. This was a thing that Dahmer had. He got a camera and he got into taking pictures of dismemberment and taking apart his bodies.
He documented everything he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of stupid, but kind of genius, because actually that's where all the proof came from.
Well, it's also just like real quick, like there was no point in his life that he was hiding who he was. Like he was never quite like he was never like okay, like we talked about before this, we were talking about other serial killers like John Wayne Gacy and stuff. He had a secret life. This guy didn't have a secret life. He was just a complete he was just a psychotic mess everywhere in his life. And if anyone had ever stopped to look at anything in his life, they would have seen and put some of the pieces together, and some of the people would still be alive. He did so many things in clear sight that everybody just saw he was like this, cute middle class white kid. Unassuming, harmless. Go on. So
I mean, initially, I cannot pronounce. I know his name is Konerak was the first name. I cannot pronounce the last name. He was initially reluctant to the proposal before changing his mind and accompanying him to his apartment, where he posed for 2 pictures in his underwear before Dahmer drugged him into unconsciousness and performed oral sex on him. Now, remember, this is a 14-year-old.
Next to the body of another dead lover.
Yeah, literally. Before he fell unconscious, Dahmer led the boy into his bedroom, where the body of the 31-year-old Tony Hughes, an aspiring model whom Dahmer had killed literally 3 days earlier, laid naked on the floor. According to Dahmer, he believed that the boy saw it. He did not react to seeing the bloating corpse, likely because he was affected by the sleeping pills that he ingested. And the worst part was the boy wasn't fully drugged. He basically escaped the apartment, and his neighbor actually saw what was going on. The boy ran out, and he ran into these other women that were also Lao, and he started talking to them, and they started freaking out, and the cops were called. And when the cops came, they saw Dahmer with the 14-year-old, and he's saying, "Oh, he's drunk, he's drunk, he's..." And remember, this boy's had a hole in his head drilled with acid. And, they were saying, no, there's something wrong, there's something... And the cops just bring the kid up.
Dahmer said, again, Dahmer's the only person who is not a person of color in this except for the cops. Dahmer said, he's 19, he's my boyfriend, he just gets too drunk sometimes. And the cops literally sent this 14-year-old with a hole in his head with acid inside back to Dahmer's apartment. Didn't search the apartment, didn't do any sort of wellness check or anything, didn't ask for ID. They said that the kid lost his ID. This is a 14-year-old who's just been, essentially mutilated and drugged. And they believed Dahmer. They believed him when he said that he had no ID. It's such a absolute miscarriage of justice. It's so insane.
It's so difficult because when you're dealing with somebody like this, we've it was kind of baffling to me that the Oxnard, the building that he was in, was demolished, and there's nothing there now. It's just a vacant lot, and there was no memorial ever made for the families. There's no in-depth video of going over with the families of what happened and their family members. Nothing. Everything's on Dahmer. There's no focus on them. And I think one of the important things about this show was kind of showing that, what about the 17 victims' families? They're alive now and they still don't have their family member.
Yeah, they're still alive and they're seeing all of this, and now they're seeing the show again. But at least now, for the first time, people know that they exist. I think that, again, that was my first thought when I started watch the beginning of the first episode. I was just like, is this just more glorifying of these people, of these psychopaths? Because I feel like our culture does do that. Because I like watching crime things, but there's an element of it where it's just how much of this is because we're curious, and how much of this is because we should know, and how much of this is just exploitative. And this one did not feel exploitative at all, because this was something where it was this talks about the exploitation at the end. There's even parts where they talk about how the family didn't get anything, or the families didn't get anything. They talk about how his father got dragged because he tried to write a documentary. I'm not right. Sorry, write a memoir about raising Jeffrey Dahmer. We kind of glorify these people and make them almost into these antagonist anti-hero figures. And I think this show was really powerful because it forced you to have to look at not what he had done to the victims, but the ripple effects that had in the world, the rest of the world, or the rest of the culture.
I mean, if you look at the Manson family, and there was the murder of Sharon Tate and the other people that were there, they blamed the Beatles. Oh yeah, we listened to Helter Skelter. They just put blame on something else. And the problem is with these killers is that it's not what they listen to, the environment, it's the fact of neglect. You can't blame the world for your problems except yourself. And one thing I learned more than anything else, his parents could not accept the fact that they were failures. They were terrible to this child. And his mother was just, in our language, we say chutzpah. She had the chutzpah to go to this family member and be like, can you come to the court and what is wrong with you?
And then she tried. This is just how just selfish. I don't even know. I don't know what to call this, but she tried to kill herself as well.
Yeah.
After he was sentenced or something, or around the sentencing, and David was like, young. And I'm not like a teenager, but like her other son was like, a pretty young dude still. And she tried to kill herself to escape the reality of what was going on with Jeffrey. And like that's how okay, so I don't necessarily I don't want people to be like, oh, like think that someone who's like, oh, suicide is selfish. Like I understand people have their reasons for doing things. But with her, I feel like she was very much I doing things for attention kind of person. And her solution to running away from the fact that she had absolutely failed this person that she was birthed was to try to take her own life and just run away again. Like, where is her accountability that she's holding herself to? At least the father, like, if from what it seems like, it's like the father at least kind of went through a period where he blamed himself and did feel bad about it, but she just literally ran away from it again.
You kind of, the overall conclusion I can say is Jeffrey Dahmer was a sane individual that had mental disorders. But because society failed him, he became what he is. And I think overall, I don't think serial killers make themselves. I think society makes a serial killer. We allow these people to develop and grow and become what they are. And there needs to be prevention for this.
I
Something.
think that there is, oh, go on. So
Yeah, I'm done.
I think there's nothing that you can do about the cards you were dealt mentally and psychologically, internally. Like, I mean, you can, oh, that's true. Let me rephrase that. You can change it but in terms of like, if you're somebody who has intrusive thoughts or has tendencies towards certain things or has like proclivities towards addiction or whatever, these are things that are in you. You can do a lot to change external factors that eventually will change the internal, change your ways of thinking, all of these things. But they're probably never going to fully go away, at least the desire to do these things. But if you are somebody who is able to find the right kind of role models or the right kind of friends or the right kind of partners or the right kind of, just like, teachers or whatever, like who can kind of help guide you away from that. No, it's not good to, one of the things he did as a kid, and this, again, where were this kid's parents in this? So I'm just real quick. At one point, he found a dead dog and he cut the head off and then eviscerated it and tied it to a tree and then showed one of his friends as a quote unquote prank. Like, a person might always have certain thoughts or certain like gravitations towards things, but there are healthy ways to remedy that and to counter against it. And if you never encounter any of those healthy ways, there's very little keeping you from going further down that dark path.
The rabbit hole.
Yeah. What keeps all of us in check in society? Why isn't society just absolute, murderous chaos? Because we all have these sort of checks and balances with people on like emotional and energetic and psychological and legal levels where we don't want to hurt this person because we care about this person. We don't want to let this person down because we care about this person. We don't want to hurt this person because it might hurt their family. And like that, these are the reasons. This is like the moral code. This is like the internal sense of right and wrong. And if no one is teaching you that, you don't necessarily grow up intrinsically knowing it. Some people do. But if you don't get taught that early enough and you don't get the positive or negative reinforcement for your actions that you need, it's easy to keep going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And lose yourself.
I do want to leave. I do want to leave off on this note and say that we can never cure the world of Jeffrey Dahmers, but what we can learn from this is there's ways of expressing yourself. there's ways of caring for our communities, and more importantly than anything is remembering that every person matters, and being true to yourself. And if you're going through something, and having that support group that's there for you to help you through this, because if you don't have it, unfortunately, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure, I think everyone can agree with this, no one like this ever happens to this level again in this country.
Can I add a thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I want to just leave it saying, like, you know, if anyone who's listening is or knows somebody who has tendencies towards, like, you know, kind of the darkness in a sense, like, please just open up to some people about it. Maybe not your family if you don't trust them or whatever, but to friends, to lovers, to find community, find people that can help you right your head when you're doing the wrong thing, and can help you get away from that. Find creative outlets for it. Find painting, drawing, art, like any kind of art, dance, like music, whatever thing that is positive and constructive, where you can get as dark as you fucking want without harming anybody else or yourself. There are outlets for all of this. And if you bottle it all up inside, it gets twisted. And when you combine that with heavy substance use and substance addiction, that's the path that you can find yourself on. If you, I don't know, I'm kind of losing the end point there, but it's basically just like, find creative outlets for these feelings.
Yeah. Like we've already said, punk, grunge, metal is also, I'll tell you honestly, like for me personally, you know, I've had that, you know, darkness and depth in my own life. And
me too. Yeah. Like crazy. Not now at 36, but when I was young. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, sometimes I want to just jam out to metal, or, you know, make a darker piece, or for example, like when I'm doing nail art, and again, like, that's a really great way of expressing. It's not a bad thing. Metal is fucking amazing. It's all about just expressing that inner darkness. Yeah.
It's cathartic. Yeah. It gives you a release, like a cathartic release. Like, okay, like think of like if Stephen King had, or like, you know, if horror writers, let's just say Stephen King had never found writing.
I love horror writers.
Yeah. But like if Stephen King had never found writing, would he be like Dahmer? Like, and if Dahmer had found something that he loved, would he just be like a weirdo artist? Like, I'm not trying to be like
it's a coulda, woulda, shoulda. It's a coulda, woulda, shoulda.
And that's not like a fail safe. Like, you also have people who are artists who are also psychos, but like finding a healthy outlet and finding people to talk to when you are going down the darkness could save your life and other people's lives.
Yes. Yes. Well, this has been it's been an interesting episode, and hope you all learned something. I definitely did, and we'll catch you on the next one.